Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're going to be looking at some games that realistically shouldn't belong on the Switch, or shouldn't even exist on the Switch for one reason or another, but yet do. There are plenty of games on the Switch that just, because they're too modern, or they're just too big, or they've got too much sort of crazy stuff going on, too many sort of intricate mechanics, or too much, too many bodies on screen, or any number of things that just shouldn't be able to run on the Switch, and, everyone was sort of like, yeah, fine, it's a handheld device, and then everyone turned around and said, oh, but wait. These impossible ports, as we're calling them, are games that already existed on other more modern hardware. I say more modern, more powerful than the Switch, things like the Xbox One and the PS4 and PC and stuff like that, and realistically, everyone would look at them and go, nah, probably not Switch, and yet, it happened. As a result, this doesn't include any first-party stuff, and this is just our personal selection of what we feel is the most impressive. We're ignoring gameplay overall and just looking at the technical feat. Big shout out to Digital Foundry for inadvertently giving us all the information we need if we go into any specifics in terms of like frame rate, beyond just being able to use our eyes, and resolution and stuff like that, and using terms like... But anyway, that's more than enough waffling, let's dive right into things. We've got to start things off with the granddaddy of them all, yes, Doom on the Nintendo Switch. When this was announced, this was just a crazy thing, and everyone just assumed it was going to run absolutely terribly, or is going to be some sort of really stripped back version of Doom, but no! It was the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. Yes, it's only running at 30 frames a second, and, realistically it's only 720p, and some of the textures are a little bit janky, but you know what? It is the whole of Doom. It is the whole of Doom running on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I'd already played the original release of Doom 2016 on the Xbox One for my sins, and yeah, obviously it runs better on the Xbox One, and I was very used to the sort of 60 frames a second, so the first time I got my hands on Doom and it was running at 30, it was a little bit jarring. But honestly, the motion blur actually, really, I don't care for motion blur, but for some reason in here, it actually works really, really well, and it makes things feel a lot smoother than realistically they actually are in-game. Whilst it may no longer be the most impressive port on the Switch, it was still kind of the first one to properly come out of the woodwork by Panic Button, who are going to be in this video an awful lot, and for it to actually be the full fat experience with just a few essentially mainly performance-based sacrifices, but the actual game and the gameplay all there 100% intact, and that was a big deal. And I think that was a moment where a lot of people were like, oh, this Switch thing can properly work. Moving on to a much more recent example, Mortal Kombat 11 by Shiver Entertainment. Now, think what you like about this particular version of Mortal Kombat, this is a damn fine port on the Switch. In terms of ports, this was the first game that was announced for the Nintendo Switch to have a simultaneous release with other systems as well. No longer would we have to wait for, sort of 6 months down the line or something, and then it comes out, like with Dark Souls and stuff like that. Well, Dark Souls Remastered. No, this was coming out at the same time on all platforms. Well, that is if you lived in North America. Unfortunately, for some strange reason, the Switch version was delayed in Europe. I don't know whether this was maybe due to translation or anything, but no, I don't know. I mean, it was probably something to do with Nintendo of Europe or something, or a patch didn't go through in time, but regardless, it got delayed until the 10th of May, as opposed to the original release date of the 23rd of April, which was a bit rubbish, and this was only the Switch version in Europe. No other version in no other region. Why? Once again, we are looking at a stripped-back version, which is not surprising in the slightest. However, this game runs at a really solid 60 frames a second. It's by no means 100% rock solid, and there have been patches subsequently which have helped things here and there, but even so, like, 99% of the time that you're playing this game, it is running at 60 frames a second. And I don't imagine that many people will be playing this version exclusively and going on to competitive side of things, you know, or anything like that. But even so, this is the same experience as it is on all other platforms. It's only the graphical fidelity that has been lowered. One-on-one fighting games aren't the hardest thing to properly code, and they're not the most intensive thing, but even so, when you consider that this game was made for other systems, current generation systems with, like, God knows how much more times the power, I wouldn't really want to put a number on it because I don't know. The fact that they got it running on the Switch and running as well as it does, that's bloody impressive. Panic Button strikes again with another Bethesda game, this time Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus. Now, if you thought Doom was impressive, then just step back a little bit, buddy, because this one's even better. It runs very similarly to how Doom does on the Switch as well, except that this game is even more graphically intensive than Doom is. I mean, it's running on an entirely new, sort of spicier new version of the engine, and it's got loads more stuff going on screen at any one time, and there are sections, especially in the original release of the game before it was patched, where things did really tank and the dynamic resolution made everything a bit of a blurry mess. Especially in the courtroom, like, I didn't play it at that time, but I saw some videos and that's some soupy goodness. But I never played Wolfenstein 2 on any other system. I saved myself for the Switch, and I played it from start to finish, and I had to keep reminding myself that I was playing this on the Switch. And yes, obviously, yeah, you know, it's 30 frames a second, it's only running at 720p, but you know what? When you're getting involved in the game, and especially a game that is as fast and hectic, and as well as anything engrossing in terms of the story as Wolfenstein, that stuff doesn't matter. Doom was a success for Panic Button and Bethesda, and I think they basically decided, well, you did it before, do it again, and they were like, hey, look, it prints money. The game is surprisingly rare today, and I actually paid really probably too much money for it because I wanted a physical cart, and you know what? I still don't regret it. I reckon I got my money's worth, and it's a damn fine version of the game. Sticking with the old Wolfenstein theme, we have got Wolfenstein Youngblood. Now, many people have their own opinions about the quality of the gameplay in this game, and some people think it's a little bit grindy, and some people feel that women shouldn't be in video games, but regardless of how you feel about the gameplay, this is a bloody fine port. Like, this blows Wolfenstein 2 out of the water, in my opinion. In terms of resolution and frame rate, it's very similar to Wolfenstein 2, but you only have to look at the quality of the textures and how quickly they load in, and my great goggly goodness. Wolfenstein 2 could be pretty blurry in places, and you go up close to something, it would take a while for the full texture to load in, but in Youngblood, forget about it. It's just there, and it's quick, and oh! I enjoy the game, but the thing I took away from this most was, if this is the same engine as Doom Eternal, this is going to be a damn tasty experience on the Switch, and I was kind of tempted to delay this video until Doom Eternal was out, but I didn't, because I didn't. Loading times are blisteringly fast, it's pretty damn stable in terms of frame rate overall, it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good, and resolution is pretty good. Again, it's only 720p, and it's a little bit blurry in handheld mode, but realistically, when you consider that this is a game that is current generation, it's bloody impressive it's running as well as it does on Switch. That's cut and paste for all of these, pretty much. still with panic button for the moment, we've got Warframe. Now, this is a free-to-play game, which is very different and has nothing to do with Bethesda. I downloaded this game because it was free, and why not? You know, it's a free game. If I don't like it, I can always remove it, and I think I did, but not because I didn't like it. I think I just ran out of room. But once again, panic button were proving that they really can put their hand to anything and port pretty much anything onto Switch. I mean, once again, yes, it's visually downgraded, but the entire content of the game is still here. And this, I think, is the hallmark of a really solid port, and it's kind of sort of the thumbprint of panic button. You know, like, if the game looks a little bit wonky in places, but it's all there. It's probably a panic button game. What's more impressive to me about this port than the other ones that we've looked at is the fact that, yes, once again, you know, it's taken a visual downgrade, but there are lots of things, like little bits of lighting here and there, that realistically you don't really need, and yet they managed to get it in there. And there is a huge list of different graphical options that you can fiddle with, depending on what you prefer, and if maybe you don't want that motion blur, and you're still happy with just 30 frames a second, you can turn it right the flip down. Personally, I think a little bit of motion blur when it comes to lower resolutions and lower frame rates can help to round out the edges a little bit, but it is your choice. I kind of feel that this game deserves a little bit more credit than it gets. Not that people haven't been singing the praises of how well it's been ported, but even so, it just sort of fell off the radar, or at least it did for me. And I think that's a real shame. I don't know whether it's the free-to-play model or what, but even so, damn, this is an incredible port. Something a bit simpler now, and it's not been made by Panic Button. I'm lying, it's made by Panic Button. Rocket League probably isn't the most taxing of games on any system realistically, and it is designed to run on lower-end hardware and run well. But what's more impressive is the fact that you can get the game running at a disgustingly solid 60 frames a second on Switch now that they've patched it all up and made it run beautifully. But you can also choose to run it at 1080p if you prefer. It's just not gonna run as well. As is probably obvious for a competitive game like Rocket League, running at 60 frames a second is absolutely paramount when you're doing things, I don't want to say properly, but feverishly. But even so, whacking it up to 1080p, it still runs pretty damn well, and it looks really, really nice. As I said before, the fact that Rocket League is running on Switch is not that impressive, but the fact that it runs so well and able to do so at 60 frames a second, now that is the impressive part. It is once again the full-fat experience of a current generation game running on a tiny little handheld like the Switch. Alright, it's not that tiny for a handheld, but it's Diddy. It's absolutely tiny. Like, look at it. It's small. And finally, we have Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Ported by it's not been ported by Panic Button, actually. No, in fact, this game was ported by QLOC, and it took me a while to actually find some information about them. In fact, when I first put it into Wikipedia, it took me to Capcom, which immediately felt wrong. They were formed in 2009, and they've ported a hell of a lot of games, mainly to PC, which is strange, and then all of a sudden they just, you know, Hellblade, why not? Just before they did that, however, they also did Tales of Vesperia, the remaster, on the Switch and the PS4 and the Xbox One and the PS... I already said PS4. But enough about the developer, what about the game itself? Well, oh, like, Jesus Christ, I have no idea how they managed to do this. As much as I adore Doom and Wolfenstein, and I think that realistically the gameplay is a little bit better on these games, Hellblade has to be one of the best looking games on the Switch, hands down. The developer Ninja Theory even said not long before that there's no way it could come to Switch, it was just too intensive, and then this small little Polish company, I don't know, maybe they came up with the idea, I don't know how it happened, but they're just like, hey, yeah, it can. And it is a beauty to behold. I mean, loading times are a little bit egregious to say the least, but once you're actually in the game and you start seeing these seamless transitions between sort of low poly count and high poly count models and stuff like that, Like, it's just completely seamless. And the whole thing is gorgeous. And it runs really well. I mean, it's, you know, it's only 30 frames a second again, but this is running on a Switch. This is a mobile processor. This is ridiculous. Whilst I think Panic Button are definitely still the kings of porting on the Switch, Qlog could realistically be just behind them, and I'm really interested to see what they're going to do in the future, and if they're going to be bringing more stuff to Switch, because, good lord, they do a damn good job. And there you have it. That is just a selection of our personal picks for the most technically impressive ports on the Nintendo Switch. Which are your favorite? Maybe there's one that wasn't even included on this list. Let us know down there in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you get that latest subscribe button running at 720p and 30 frames a second, but it's still that subscribe button. And be sure to check out nintendolife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.